Assalamu alaikum dear students. Welcome to the course Principle in Animal Life 2. This is lecture number 46. The topic is rates of evolution and related concepts. Discussing agenda for the topic is rates of evolution, molecular evolution, gene duplication, and finally mosaic evolution. Lecture outcome. After watching and listening this lecture, students will know about various concepts related to evolution. Rates of evolution. Evolution is the change in the genetic composition of a population across several generations. Whether this process occurs continuously or it has stop and start phases. So here this particular heading is basically concerned with the pace of evolution, at which pace this process occurs. The first is, so we will discuss two concepts in this particular respect. One is Phyletic Gradualism and the second one is Punctuated Equilibrium. First, Phyletic Gradualism. In the Phyletic Gradualism model of evolution, changes are gradual over long time periods. So this concept says that the process of evolution is a slow and steady and continuous process, and it takes lot of time for a particular organ or as a whole an individual to evolve. Charles Darwin perceived evolutionary change is occurring gradually over millions of years. Charles Darwin was a famous evolutionary biologist. He was of the opinion that evolution is a slow process and it takes a lot of time. Phyletic gradualism has been the traditional interpretation of the tempo or rate of evolution. So because Charles Darwin had earned name and fame for himself, therefore the people used to follow his ideas and concepts, and the followers of the Mendelian Darwinian school of thought were also of the opinion that it's a slow and steady process. Some evolutionary changes, however, happen very rapidly. There are exceptional cases where the process of evolution has been reported to have occurred over a short span of time. Punctuated equilibrium. Now it is different from the Phyletic gradualism. It says that rapid periods of change interrupt long periods of stasis. Phyletic gradualism says that evolution is a slow and steady and continuous process, whereas this concept says that evolution occurs at a great pace for certain period of time, and then there is no evolution, there is a period of rest, and after that once again this process of evolution starts. So there is a stop-start periods in this process. Stasis means the time frame where no evolution takes place. Now, studies of the fossil record show that many species do not change significantly over millions of years. Fossil record provides an evidence for this concept because we does not have 100% full fossil record for any species. There are instances where the fossils are not found, where the intermediate stages of the evolutionary history of an organism are not available. So the fossil record shows that changes do not occur over millions of years. These periods of stasis or standing still mean no evolution or equilibrium are interrupted when the group encounters an ecological crisis such as change in climate or a major geological event. So this concept says that when there is a change in the environment, then this change requires some kind of adaptation in the species. If the species becomes adapted to that change, then they survive and grow. And if they are unable to adapt to the change, then the species becomes extinct. Now, when the environment changes, then the species usually tend to change in order to adapt themselves to the changed environment. And when there is no change in the environment, then the species tends to pass through a period of stasis where no evolution in them takes place. So over the next 10,000 to 100,000 years, a variation that previously was selectively neutral or disadvantageous might now be advantageous. So remember from the previous topics, once we discussed that it is not a particular trait which is useful or harmful. It is the environment which makes a trait useful or harmful. For example, you are wearing thick clothes in winters. Now you are adaptable in a good way to the environment. But if you have the same kind of dressing in the summer season, then you will be in trouble because of the excessive heat. So the same phenotype is a good one in certain conditions, and then the same becomes a bad one in other conditions. Similarly, the same phenomena occurs in the wild environment. A trait which was once not beneficial or disadvantageous becomes useful when the environment changes. Alternatively, geological events might result in new habitats becoming available. So geological events means that large scale changes occurs on the earth's surface where the new mountain ranges are developed, where new valleys are formed, where the river makes new channels. So these geological changes, they open new habitats for the species. Events that occur in 1000, 10,000 to 100,000 years are almost instantaneous in an evolutionary time frame. This particular sentence means that evolution is a process which takes millions of years. 1 million has 10 legs. So for a process which occurs so slowly, then even a gap of this much time is like a second. If you consider an hour and then you consider a second, so it is a short frame of time when you compare it with millions of years. This geologically brief period of change punctuates the previous million or so years of equilibrium and eventually settles into the next period of stasis. So we have a period where no This is a period where no evolution is taking place, and then suddenly the species starts to evolve because of the change in the environmental conditions, and then there is a period of stasis, and after that again the process of evolution takes place. So this is punctuated equilibrium. So these are the two models which describe the pace or the rate of evolution. The first one is Phyletic Gradualism, which says that the process of evolution is a slow and continuous process that is spread over long periods of time. There is the ancestral species which with the passage of time evolved into 3 different species. On the other hand is punctuated equilibrium, which say that there is a time where evolution occurs, then it is followed by a period of stasis where no change takes place, and again the period of stasis is followed by a rapid change. So this is the diagrammatic representation. The vertical line shows the period of stasis where no change takes place, and then there is that horizontal line which marks rapid change, and then again it is followed by the vertical lines which means stasis. So here is that stop, start, stop, whereas on the other hand continue a slow and gradual process. Fossil record is scratchy, and therefore fossil record validate this type of model for the rate of evolution. In a series of studies over a 20-year period, Peter R. Grant has shown that natural selection results in rapid morphological changes in the bills of Galapagos Island. I think we have already discussed that experiment where the beak depth increased or decreased depending upon the availability of the food material. So from 1976 to 1978, the birds had larger, deeper bills because this was a period of drought. The rainfall had decreased significantly, which badly affected the growth of the plants on the seeds of whom those birds used to feed. Therefore, when those plants declined, then these birds started to look for other sources of food, and they found other seeds which could only be harvested by having larger and deeper bills. So these birds tend to develop larger and deeper bills with the passage of time. There is another example in the Lake Victoria where the process of rapid evolutionary change has been reported in the last 14,000 years, and this process of rapid evolutionary change has resulted in the evolution of several species of cichlid fishes. One cichlid species, Haplochromis pyrocephalus, was early extirpated from Lake Victoria following the introduction of Nile perch. Nile perch is an invasive species, and when it is introduced somewhere, it tends to drastically affect the population of other fishes because it consumes or utilizes all the resources which are on offer. So therefore, when this exotic species was introduced, it barely affected the growth and development in the population of the native cichlid species. Subsequent fishing pressure on the Nile perch allowed the cichlid population to recover somewhat. Then the fishermen or the local residents of that area started to hunt for or started to fish that fish and capture it. So then what happened? Initially its population was large, so it affected the growth and development of cichlid, and after fishing, after netting, its population declined, so its control over the resources also declined, and more resources became available for cichlid to grow and thrive. And after the fishing pressure on Nile perch, an opportunity was at hand for cichlid species to recover. However, decreased water quality and oxygen levels placed additional selection pressure on its survival. Then suddenly the water quality deteriorated, the oxygen levels dropped, and it further complicated the situations for the cichlid species. Now, over a brief span of 20 years, researchers have documented 64% increase in gill surface area and corresponding changes in head morphology that are allowing this cichlid population to recover once again. So this is an example of the punctuated equilibrium, that evolution can occur over a short span of time, just 20 years. 64% increase in the gill surface area was reported when gills are basically responsible for the respiration and the taking up of dissolved oxygen. So the increase in the gill surface area means even the lesser oxygen can be benefited from in maximum way. So this was evolution and it was induced by environmental change, and it occurred over a short period of time, only 20 years. Periods of stasis in the punctuated equilibrium model may be the result of stabilizing selection during times when environmental changes conditions are not changing. So stasis is the period where no evolution takes place, and one of the explanation for that is that maybe the environment remains stable in that period, and therefore the species require no new adaptations, no changes. The ability of the organisms to escape changing environments through migration when environments are changing may also promote stasis. So here is one example of stasis. Another example of stasis may be that suppose the species are living in a particular environment, and then the environment changed, so the species, instead of adapting themselves to the changed environment, prefer to migrate to other destinations. Therefore the change or the evolution in the species didn't occur. Now, one advantage of the punctuated equilibrium model is its explanation for the fossil record, not always showing transitional stages between related organisms. We have already discussed that the fossil record provides an evidence to the validity of punctuated equilibrium, because the fossil record is scratchy, it is not available for any species. The 100% fossil record for any species is not available. There are some loopholes, there are some missing links, some of the fossils are missing. So this kind of data validates punctuated equilibrium model, and the absence of these transitional stages, they can be attributed to the problems in fossilization. Suppose someone says that maybe the reason for the lack of the fossil record, or for the lack or absence of the transitional stages, may be that the conditions at that time were not suitable for fossilization, and therefore the fossil record was not stored properly in the sediments. Now, because punctuated equilibrium involves rapid changes in small isolated populations, preservation of intermediate forms in the fossil record is even less likely. The rapid pace of evolution resulted in apparent jumps from one form to another. So it says that this evolutionary change is actually a jump from one form to another instead of slow and gradual transition. Now, the summary of the two types: phyletic gradualism and punctuated equilibrium are both valid models that explain evolutionary rates. Gradualism best describes the evolutionary history of some groups, for example mammals, where we lack a complete fossil record, and there are so many areas where the fossils, the transitional stages are missing. Punctuated equilibrium best describes the evolutionary history of others. For For example, marine invertebrates where the fossils have been preserved. For still other groups, evolution have been accented by periods when gradualism prevailed and other periods of rapid change and stasis. So both these models are valid and they are validated by examples from the nature, and both these models explains the evolutionary rates. Phyletic gradualism is the accumulation of small changes in organisms over a long period of time that eventually results in the formation of new species, whereas punctuated equilibrium involves long periods of constancy or stasis interrupted by short periods of evolutionary change. Both of those types have been documented in different animal groups. Now, molecular evolution. Many evolutionists study changes in animal structure and function that are observable on a large scale. For example, changes in the shape of a bird's bill or the length of an animal's neck. So it is usually the area of focus for the evolutionary biologists. However, evolution can also take place on molecular level, where the small molecules also evolve. The presence of a molecule over a diverse range of species is an evidence to the fact that they do have evolutionary relationship with each other. All evolutionary change, however, results from changes in the base sequence in DNA and amino acids in proteins. So the change which is there in the phenotype or the physical attributes of an organism is actually because of the change in the genetic makeup of the organism, because it is the genes which controls the phenotype. The genotype controls the phenotype. So a change must occur first on the DNA level, and then this change will be exhibited in the phenotype, because the sequence of DNA, a sequence of nucleotides in DNA determines the sequence of amino acids in proteins. So if a change occurs in the sequence of nucleotides in DNA, this change will be exhibited in the sequence of amino acids in protein, and as a result a change will occur in the phenotype. Molecular evolutionists investigate evolutionary relationship among organisms by studying DNA and proteins. So the similarities in the nucleotide sequence of DNA and the amino acid sequence of proteins is used as a criteria for determining the evolutionary relationship. We select a particular gene and then we find out the nucleotide sequence of that gene in a diverse range of species, and then through bioinformatic tools we can determine the similarities or differences depending upon the number of nucleotides which are in common or different from each other. Now here cytochrome C is used as an example to assess the relationship amongst diverse group of individuals. Cytochrome C is an electron carrier in electron transport chain, and it is present in all eukaryotic organisms because the electron transport chain is the final stage of cellular respiration, and therefore this process occurs in all eukaryotic organisms. So this protein is used for estimating the similarities or differences between organisms, or to draw any evolutionary relationship between diverse group of organisms. Now here you can see that the cow and sheep, there are no amino acids which are different in their cytochrome C. Their cytochrome C has the same number and kind of amino acids, whereas between a cow and a whale there is a difference of only 2 amino acids. 2 amino acids are variable in their cytochrome C, and similarly the relationship for others is also shown. So you can see here, the lesser the difference is, the more closely the two are related to each other. Gene duplication is an event which is responsible for the formation of new alleles. A gene is duplicated, and the new duplicated portion is now available for natural selection, and quite often the duplicated portion adopts some function which is closely related with the original sequence from which it was duplicated. For example, the presence of hemoglobin protein and myoglobin protein is because of a duplication event. These two molecules are related to each other. Hemoglobin is responsible for the transport of oxygen in the body, whereas myoglobin is found in muscles, and there it stores oxygen. So these two molecules probably originated from a single common ancestral molecule which used to perform both functions. So there was one ancestral molecule which performed the function of transport of oxygen in the whole body as well as to the muscles, and then over 800 million years ago a gene duplication event took place, which resulted in a new segment, and then this new segment started to perform somewhat similar function, and myoglobin protein evolved. This is the nucleotide sequence of one gene, and because of gene duplication event, this nucleotide sequence is doubled. It becomes doubled. Now the original sequence will perform its function, and this new sequence, it is a raw material for evolution. Maybe the evolution enables or selects this area, and this area starts performing a function somewhat similar to the original sequence from where it was formed. So exactly the same happened to the ancestral molecule, and then this ancestral molecule duplicated, and the other duplicated portion became a gene for the formation of myoglobin. The last one is mosaic evolution. Mosaic evolution says it is a concept that the process of evolution occurs at different rates in different structures of an individual. For example, your brain is evolving at a different pace than your limbs, and your limbs are evolving at a different pace than your teeth. So in a particular organism, the rate, the pace of evolution is different, and this individual is a mosaic for the evolutionary change, where the process of evolution is occurring in different structures and at different rates. So the basic design of a bird provides a simple example. All birds are easily recognizable as birds because of highly conserved structures such as feathers, bills, and a certain body form. Particular parts of birds, however, are less conservative, means the changes occurs in those particular parts, and they have higher rate of change, just like some of the areas in genome are mutational hotspots which have higher rates of mutation than others. So wings have been modified for hovering, soaring, and swimming. Now there are so many species of birds, and all of them have those basic structures, but the wings have been modified for hovering, for swimming, and for other purposes. So we can say that wing is that particular portion which is less conservative and have higher rates of evolution as compared to other organs. Similarly, legs have been modified for wading, swimming, and perching. Perching means grabbing the branch of a tree on which the bird is sitting. These are examples of mosaic evolution, and organisms are the product of accumulated evolutionary events. Some evolutionary events are slow and result in recognizable lineages of organisms. Other evolutionary events occur rapidly and produce variations within each lineage. What is another example of mosaic evolution? So you should find it on the web. And this is the end of the chapter and the end of the course. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.